Hey, welcome, people. Welcome over to our Veteran Podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe to my channel on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you find this podcast. Today's show, I want to go ahead and put a disclaimer out there. Guys, do not stop any medical treatment that you're already receiving. We're just giving alternative medical treatment until your doctor says anything different. Continue medical treatment. And this is not medical advice for you to take and just totally stop your medical treatment. I just want to put a disclaimer out there. Today's show is going to be talk about an alternative to traumatic brain injury, TBI, and also PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. So sit back, enjoy the show. It's going to be very informative. Make sure you got a pen and paper. But hey, let's get it. Hello, welcome to Over and Out Veterans Podcast. Today I have Mr. Jim Hooker today. He's going to talk to us about this state-of-the-art treatment that he's providing to some of my veterans here in the United States and in Eastern North Carolina. That's where I reside, and it's very near and dear to my heart because I know a lot of my military buddies are suffering from some things that he's helping them with. So without further ado, Mr. Hooker, how are you out there?
I'm very good today. Thank you for having me, Charlemagne.
No problem, no problem. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you lead up, and tell little people about what the program is that you're helping veterans do.
I'd be happy to do that. So I spent 20 years in the Navy. I was a Vietnam veteran. I wound up spending the last 36 years before I came down to North Carolina in Washington, D.C. While I was there, toward the end of my time there, which goes back 11 years ago now, I got associated with a church ministry that was servicing men and women who were dealing with their veterans who had come from, in this case, typically out of Europe, through Ramstein Hospital into Walter Reed and Bethesda Naval Hospitals for recovery from serious injuries. Mm-hmm. We first went over there as a ministry just to help the parents of these men and women deal with what it was like to show up in Washington, D.C., having no idea what it took to live there or anything else for that matter, let alone access the hospital. And it turns out it's a nightmare.
Right.
The traffic in Washington is horrible. Getting access to these hospitals is really difficult. Now there's only one. It's the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center at Bethesda. And the location of that hospital is in a very difficult location traffic-wise. So that's a problem for them. If you had a call from somebody who had your son or daughter and said they're coming back from Ramstein, they're going to be in this hospital next week, and you lived in, say, Podunk, Iowa, or where I live in Greenville, North Carolina, you might have no idea how to get to wind up in Bethesda, let alone be able to access that hospital. So our ministry was designed to try to connect with those families and help them.
Okay.
Where we went with that was kind of interesting. We started a foundation called the Wounded in Action Family Foundation several years later. And that foundation had as its mission to bring home the men and women who left the hospital under a military discharge.
Okay.
And the reason for that was we found out the Navy, in this case, Marines, and the Army really didn't do much of a job of transitioning these men and women to the civilian community. So, for example, they're going to come to Greenville, North Carolina. They'd get their orders discharged, and they'd wind up in Greenville, North Carolina with a family to take care of them, and no idea how to do it, and no idea what their son or daughter really had for a problem. Along the way, we got a case of a triple amputee, an Army soldier who had been blown up, obviously, And we spent about $400,000 and a year and a half trying to bring him home, which was our mission.
Mm-hmm.
So we wound up getting him into a home. We got his wife a job. He had 5 kids. We got him signed up at the local community college, and we didn't get him home. And we didn't get him home because his head didn't work.
Right.
At the time, I didn't know what TBI and PTSD were.
Mm-hmm.
That's traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress disorder. But his case taught me. And what I learned about that was the following, and it's true today. It turns out that we in the VA and DOD treat traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder as mental illness.
Right.
The significance of being treated as mental illness is that they're treated with drugs and counseling.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a brain injury, that is to say, if you have tissue in your brain that's been damaged and you've lost the function of that part of your brain because it's been damaged, and you get pills to treat the symptoms, you're never going to get recovered because the pills cannot heal the injured brain. As it turns out, there's only one thing that really can heal an injured brain, and that's oxygen therapy. So I discovered all that as a result of the case I described earlier from a guy named Dr. Paul Harsh, Harch. Dr. Harsh operates Harch Hyperbarics in New Orleans, Louisiana. He's a world-class expert on the subject of oxygen therapy for brain injuries and brain dysfunction, I call it.
Gotcha.
So things like dementia, autism, TBI and PTSD, multiple sclerosis. There's a whole series of diseases and problems that originate with the brain. And it turns out that we're treating all those with the drug industry with drugs. And we're not treating the injured brain itself. What we have learned, what Dr. Harsh learned, and I have now captured from him going back 15 years, is that oxygen therapy actually heals injured brain tissue. And the shorter version of oxygen story goes like this. You and I are breathing 20% oxygen at the Earth's atmosphere pressure, which is 1.0 atmosphere is absolute. So it's really 21% oxygen at 1.0 atmosphere is absolute. You go into an oxygen chamber and you are receiving a 100% oxygen through a mask or a hood. And generally you're receiving it under pressure greater than 1.0. Typically it's going to be somewhere between 1.5 and 2.0 atmosphere is absolute. The effect of that is it drives oxygen into your lungs and into your bloodstream and out into the areas in your brain or your body, for that matter, where you have damage that has not been repaired.
Oh, okay.
Now, it turns out also that oxygen is an essential ingredient of the body's immune system. So your immune system works based on oxygen. That is to say that God gave you the ability to breathe. And one of the reasons you need oxygen is not only for your whole body to function, digestive system and the rest, but if you cut your finger, for example, the body's blood goes out to that spot and says, whoa, it's got oxygen there. It says, whoa, we got a problem here. We got to fix. And it fires up the immune system to go out there and heal.
Gotcha.
So that happens with us routinely every day with all these small things that we have going on in our life where we cut ourselves or bruise ourselves or whatever happens to us. It can happen to us with more serious, if you go into surgery and you have surgery, it can make a difference in how you recover. Most of us are familiar with the fact that when you see on TV somebody who is in emergency, an EMT is recovering them, the first thing you see them do is slap an oxygen mask on them.
True
and the reason they're doing that is because they're pumping more oxygen into their bloodstream because it's needed for whatever's going on, whatever damage you suffered. That oxygen is gonna increase the ability of your body to heal.
Okay.
So having that as background, I came down to North Carolina about 10 years ago. And knowing what I just described to you is true, I got connected to the Vidant Hospital, to the director of rehabilitation medicine over there. Became a very good friend of mine. His name is Dan Moore. He's now retired. So Dan and I had a number of soirees trying to get them to use they have a clinic at 10th Street. It's called a wound care clinic. They have 3 oxygen mono chambers. There are 3 single chambers.
Oh, wow.
And they treat just what I just described. They treat it with oxygen therapy for people who have damaged systems that cannot be recovered. So there's 14 indications that are approved for use of oxygen therapy. For example, if you have a wound that won't close, a diabetic foot ulcer is a good example, or a surgical, you've had cancer and you have a surgical wound that won't close because your system's been compromised. They stick you in one of those chambers and your wound will heal.
Right.
And
Me personally, I experienced that with a skin graft. I had a skin graft due to
skin graft is a very good example.
Yeah, a skin graft, and they didn't do the chamber, but they did a centralized oxygen method for my foot, and like you said, it healed up within that 10 days.
Yeah, it does heal right up.
Yep.
Well, that very thing you experienced, Charlemagne, is what happens in the brain. So. Anyhow, I tried to talk to Vidant Hospital the other day. I spent 3 or 4 years chasing those guys around, trying to get them to do it.
Right.
And they wouldn't do it because oxygen therapy is not on the approved list by the Food and Drug Administration for TBI and PTSD.
Okay.
So that took me to trying to figure out what to do about it. My next stop was, if you know the name Henry Hinton, Henry was familiar with the fact that I've been working with veterans in a number of different ways, including putting on our annual Veterans Day and Memorial Day programs here in the county, in the city. And he said, you want to meet this guy called Greg Murphy. He's just been appointed to the North Carolina legislature, and he might be interested in what you're talking about. So sure enough, he and I had lunch. I briefed Dr. Murphy on the science and all the rest of it. And he said, I know this works. And you give me a year in the legislature, and next year we'll work on a law.
Okay.
That turned out to be 2018. 2019, I wrote a law, a very brief law, 1 paragraph. He got it through the legislature, and it was signed into law in 2019. And it authorized the use of oxygen therapy for TBI and PTSD.
Okay.
The reason we needed a law is what I mentioned earlier. The FDA hadn't approved it. As a result of that law, in 2021, we received $150,000 worth of funding from the North Carolina legislature to treat veterans with TBI and PTSD. And as we sit here now, you and I, we have treated somewhere between 18 and 20 will have actually completed therapy successfully as a result of that funding.
Okay.
We also received an additional $100,000 in 2022. And we have 8 patients now in therapy as a result of receiving that funding.
Okay.
And we will be going back to ask for 2023 money funding. And we've also will be providing a report, or in fact, we're working on it now, on the results of those earlier veterans, the 20 that I mentioned who have been successfully treated as a result of the initial funding we received from the state.
Gotcha.
The significance of that in the state of North Carolina, in fact, the significance of that in the country is really important. Let me start with that idea. Turns out there's only 2 states in the country, or maybe 3 now, that have actually received funding and treated veterans with oxygen therapy. Oklahoma, Florida, and North Carolina. There are a couple of others that are in process of getting that. Kentucky may have it very shortly. There are 7 states in the country that have passed a law like the one we have here. And all 7 of those states are working on what we're doing here.
Oh, okay.
So we are not alone. We are actually one of a large contingent of people across the country who know what I've just described to you is true, that veterans can recover from TBI and PTSD, that they can't receive it from the VA and DOD, that it's not authorized by the federal government, and that the only way you can get it is either with state or private funding.
Right.
There's a great deal of private funding going on now that takes care of that.
Okay.
So we have a website that where you could go and find a couple of veterans who've been successfully treated. That website, I'll say it and then I'll spell it.
Okay.
It's hbotforvets.com, hbotforvets.com. You will find 2 veterans videos there, the total of about 8 minutes worth of video. One is from an E9 Marine by the name of Simon LeMay. Simon was a 25-year Marine who had multiple blast exposures. He was going to take his own life. He actually wound up calling me on the phone about 5 years ago as a result of a visit that we had made to the Wounded Warrior Battalion at Camp Lejeune and the base down there, asking for, could he have oxygen therapy? And we subsequently got private funding and got him treated. His story is on that video.
Okay.
He and his wife both. His wife's name is Kate.
Okay.
The other story is from a gentleman by the name of Greg Green. Greg owns and operates the Great Harvest Bread Company here on Evans Street in Greenville.
Okay.
He was a former chaplain in the Army.
Gotcha.
He was forward deployed to Afghanistan near the Pakistan border. And he also had suicide ideation issues, TBI and PTSD, and his story is also there.
Wow.
So that's 2 of the stories that you can see. And there's also a brief description there. The reason I mentioned the website, Charlemagne, is this: people are wondering about what is oxygen therapy and stuff. You can go on that website, very quickly see those 2 videos, and there's a brief description of what it is and how it works.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. And so these gentlemen here, they're with their, with everything that they experienced. I did watch one of the videos, and it was very enlightening to see the transformation and things, what they went through and how it actually helped them. I was very impressed because and like I said, but how do you find the individuals that's willing to participate in this treatment, or do they find you? How does that work?
Actually, it's really begun with the help of a guy named Mike Weeks. So Mike was a former general manager at WITN News.
Okay.
He came aboard the program almost about a year ago now.
Okay.
And there's a young woman by the name of Melissa Spain, who's the chief executive officer of a foundation called the Foundation of North Carolina East. And she knew Mike and suggested that if we were going to run an advertising campaign, Mike could help. Well, it turns out the guy's been extraordinary.
Okay.
I mean, he knows how to get into each one of these TV stations. He's familiar with all the executives in TV here in the area, in the county, and that for that matter in the state. And he led us into an advertising campaign for a very small amount of money that allowed us to advertise in the eastern part of North Carolina. And in 6 weeks, we had 31 responses and wound up with the veterans that I talked about who got approved and treated.
Wow.
He is also going to be with us. We're really waiting for the election to get over.
Okay.
Because right now you can't get TV space for anything
right.
other than
Yeah.
wanting to get elected, as you probably know, as we would all see actually.
Yeah.
So, but we're going to have a major campaign to raise funding for this.
Okay.
Probably either more likely in January than anything else.
Okay.
Because after election, you got Thanksgiving, Christmas, and people get preoccupied. So we'll probably go out into January and then have a major campaign. You'll probably hear it and see about it in that time frame.
Right. And definitely let me know. I'll be sure to share it on my platforms as well. And we will definitely support you. Because, you know, like I said, that's how we met through a buddy of mine. Like I said, I've been knowing him since he was probably 12 years old. And I know his situation, you know, he got hit overseas. He still has shrapnel in his body, you know,
Does
from
he?
that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I haven't seen, you know, I know he has good days and bad days. So I'm always there for him. And, you know, I'm glad he's taking his steps to take part of this therapy as well. And where would individuals go seek the therapy? Where would they actually be doing therapy if they're here in North Carolina?
Yeah. So the therapy is done at a clinic called Extivita.
Okay.
I'll spell that. It's EXTIVITA. It's on the net. Extivita is located in Durham, up near the airport, up near the Raleigh airport.
Okay.
They have two multi-seat chambers. One has 6 seats in them. The other has 8. So when you go into one of those chambers, a typical session is going to be 90 minutes.
Okay.
You go into the chamber, you put on a hood or a mask. They seal the chamber. It's like a small airplane, actually, a small airplane cabin. It has TV and you can read or whatever you want to do in there.
Gotcha.
So you go in, you put the mask on, they seal the chamber. It takes about 14 minutes to get to pressure. The pressure there is 2.0 atmospheres absolute.
Okay.
You'd be 60 minutes at 100% oxygen at that pressure, and then about 14 minutes to get down.
Okay.
And then you come out. A protocol is going to be 40 sessions like that.
Okay.
So it is not easy to do.
Right.
And by the way, I do the personal interviews for people who go into the North Carolina program. I usually get an application from them on that website, which they can find.
Okay.
And then I would generally get on the phone and talk to them for 45 minutes or an hour. I like to go through their entire careers because oftentimes they've suffered injuries without realizing they actually had them.
Right.
A lot of Marines. What service were you in, Charlemagne?
I was in the U.S. Army.
You were the Army guy. Okay.
Yeah, field artillery.
So, well, you could probably have had this experience too, but I found that when you talk to these men and women who go through training, a lot of times they get beat up in training.
Right.
That is, say their heads get beat up. They don't really think they had anything wrong, but if they got knocked unconscious,
right.
If you've been unconscious, you had a brain injury.
Right. Right.
If you had multiple exposures to blast or live fire, you probably also suffered some sort of an injury to the brain.
Wow.
And you know, when you're younger, you don't notice those things.
Exactly.
But when you get to be like 45 or 50, by the way, the average age of those 20 veterans we treated is 50.
Oh, wow.
It's 50 years old.
Oh, wow.
And the reason for that is by the time you get around to 50, you really begin to feel the effects of these things. It just turns out brain injury is the brain. So let me go back and just talk I'm not a doctor, as you know, but let me let me just give you a couple of insights about the body.
Okay.
So the healing mechanism in the body is the same mechanism for all the organs, but the organs all have different healing rates. So the brain and the heart are very slow to heal. On the other hand, the liver is very fast. So if you've been an alcoholic and you stop drinking, in 6 months, you can regenerate your liver.
Oh, wow.
On the other hand, the heart and the brain, because they're very slow, if you pump oxygen into the bloodstream and they go out to the heart and the brain, you can accelerate the healing in the heart and the brain. The amount of damage you receive to the brain is a direct correlation to how much therapy you need. So as I said, a protocol is 40. We've learned that 40 is usually a typical positive result. Okay. It does take 40 sessions to get that for most people who have suffered a brain injury. Sometimes it takes 80. My first case was a guy named Major Ben Richards, who was blown up in a Stryker vehicle in Bakuba, Iraq. He was an Army captain. He's now had about 120 sessions. Okay. So he had 40 originally, and then he had 40 more, and now he goes back and gets an extra session or two once or twice a year.
Gotcha.
And it just gets him refired up again, that kind of thing. And of course, he's an older guy now. He's in his 50s as well.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you say 90-minute sessions, so would that be per, like, if you do one session, You do multiple sessions in a day. You just do one session, and that's
Yeah,
it.
typically, yeah, good question. So you can do them. Well, let me respond to it differently, and then I'll come back to that part.
Okay,
So
all right.
the amount of intensity in the therapy you get is directly related to the quality of the recovery you get from it.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is, if you can do 2 a day, 5 days a week. The clinic's not open on weekends.
Okay.
If you did 2 a day for 5 days for 20 days for 40 sessions, you would maximize the benefit you would get from that therapy.
Gotcha.
And the way you can think about that is, it's like penicillin. When they load you up and you're sick, they front load it. So you want to take a whole lot of penicillin in the beginning, and then it lasts for days.
Right.
That's kind of oxygen therapy is the same kind of deal. Once your body gets used to what you're doing, you tend to drive the stimulus into your body again and again and again, and you maximize the result.
Gotcha.
You also can get very good results for 1 a day for 40 days.
Okay.
That would take a couple months, obviously.
Right.
The logistics of this, as you can tell from the sound of that, it's not easy.
No.
The program in the North Carolina program has a hotel included in it.
Okay.
So we would put the veterans who qualify up in a hotel, and they can go up and stay overnight, 1, 2, 3, 4 nights.
Okay.
And some of them, about 4 or 5 of them, have gone up there and done 20 and 2 a day for 20 days.
Okay. Okay.
And now, if somebody wanted to figure out how to get into the program, I'd recommend they look at the website.
Okay.
And then you could call me.
Okay.
And my phone number is 703-994-5201. If you're wondering whether you would qualify, call me. Don't worry about trying to get on the website. If you want to get on the website and understand more about it, see those videos and get some understanding of it, you can do that. Or you can call me and I'd be happy to talk to you. I have no problem talking to any veteran. I talk to them all the time.
And he will, people out there, he will answer the phone. Look,
Yeah, I will answer the phone.
He'll let you know if he's busy or not, but he will answer that phone.
If you get to me, you'll hear from me.
Yeah. And I'm appreciative of that, man. You're real, stand-up guy, Jim. Just in the short time that I've known you, we've probably about a week or so now. And like I said, just our interaction, man, it seems like I know you for a long time. But but you just have that giving personality, and we need more people like you in our community.
Well, thank you for that thought. Now, let me just say one last thing about so that people don't get the wrong idea. This program is not a program that I have that I can be responsible for, right? In the sense that we have a team, and I mentioned that one of the people on the team is Mike, and he brings to the table the ability to get the word out so people understand we have a program. Melissa Spain, who was the CEO of the Community Foundation of North Carolina East, she is the fiduciary for the money that comes from the state. She's managing the funds and managing the interface with the North Carolina legislature, wow. Which is critical to the success of the program. A guy named Ed DiGirolamo, I'll spell his last name. It's small D-I, capital Girolamo. Ed DiGirolamo owns and operates a business called the Steel Network. Extavita operates under that business. Okay. He created that clinic out of whole cloth about 4.5 years ago. Wow. So when I first knew him, I went up and he walked me around his steel company's section of the warehouse that he has, a very large warehouse up in Durham. And it was just a steel floor. And he converted that steel floor in about a year into what is now this clinic that's treating veterans and first responders.
Awesome. That's a blessing, man. I appreciate your team as well. Definitely give them a shout out. And you got any upcoming events that you're doing out? Do you guys do any type of outreach or anything that the veterans could participate in and, to meet you guys?
So a couple things. You can donate funds on that website. Okay. There's a donate button on there now. You can donate funds directly to the Community Foundation of North Carolina East. Okay. And all you would need to do is put in the remarks section, HBOT for vets, HBOT for vets. And the funds will go directly into that fund. Those are the two primary ways you can get it done right now.
Okay.
You could donate money to the Ex Vita clinic and designate it for HBOT for vets as well.
Okay.
I would be, I mean, and all those should be done by check, by the way, or check or money, something that would be able to allow you to stipulate where the money's going to go and what it's for.
Understandable. Okay. All right. Any further things that you want to share with the community events out there?
Yeah, let me just say this about the clinic. It's the clinic is a world-class clinic. It's they have now been doing this for 4 years.
Okay.
They have a huge success of supporting first responders, police and firemen, a number of other people who have suffered brain injury, athletes.
Okay.
They've been associated with helping people in the Carolina hockey team,
Okay.
professional hockey team. There is a doctor on site there. There is a nurse practitioner who manages the program day to day.
Okay.
And there are a bunch of highly trained technicians who manage the therapy. And if you go into one of those chambers, you go in with one of those people who stay in the chamber with you during the therapy.
Oh, okay.
So you're not going to be alone in that chamber. And by the way, these days you would probably wind up with a veteran or two in the chamber with you.
Okay.
Because of the program.
Gotcha. That's good. That's good. Yeah, man. Like I know you're a busy guy, man. I don't want to, hold too much of your time. So I just want to get the information out there to other people because I was excited when I heard the information, and what you had going on. And we'll definitely be in touch, man. And hey, keep helping the vets and keep helping our community.
Yeah, listen, you do it for me, Charlemagne.
Yeah,
you do it for us, and most importantly, you do it for them.
Yeah.
You got any of these veterans who are wondering about, we have a major suicide problem in the country, and a major suicide problem in veterans.
Exactly.
And the major suicide problem in veterans, one of the causes is that we have these men and women who have been told there's nothing that we can do for them because they have a brain injury, and the drugs are driving them crazy.
Right.
And the answer is there is something we can do for them. And it not only does that, but it works.
Right. Right.
We can make a difference in their lives.
That's what we need.
That's it, my friend.
That's it, man. I greatly appreciate you, man. And then, like I said, we'll definitely be in touch. And any information you need me to share for you, definitely feel free to reach out. And like I said, we over and out, man. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you so much, Charlemagne. I very much appreciate your time for giving me the opportunity to be able to talk to your audience.
Oh, no problem. Appreciate you.
All right. God bless, my friend.
God bless you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.